of Lee Castle Farm in my constituency, bang in between the villages of Wolverley and Cookley, and to the north of Kidderminster. Quarry, as I say, is 105 acres and is set to be excavated over a 10-year period, with a requirement to store the land to its original agricultural use at the end of that period. And the family who own Lee Castle Farm have entered into an agreement with NRS Aggregates, who are going to undertake the excavation. I think before I get into the meat of my points, I want to actually talk about a few points of utter agreement. There are certain things that I do agree with. The first is that I completely agree that we do need to quarry. It is absolutely essential that we can dig out aggregates and building materials in order to meet the government's target of building 300,000 homes over the period of this Parliament, with a million over the complete forecast period. This has got to come from somewhere, and holes in the ground are as good as any, although it is worth bearing in mind that actually recycling aggregates is something that we should do. Secondly, I also understand that in order to lessen the impact on the environment, the nearer the quarry is to any development, the better it is. Fewer miles driven by lorries lowers damage to the environment. And Wild Forest Local Plan sets ambitions for around 5,400 homes between now and 2032, the vast majority of which will need aggregate resources. Thirdly, the planning application is designed to be sensitive. It proposes a phased process with a central plant being established for the full 10-year period, and then 5 subsequent processes lasting, I guess, 2 years each, with each subsequent phase requiring to infill the previous phase in order to reduce the impact on the local area. It's also worth bearing in mind that there are requirements to have a left-only exit from the site, thereby avoiding the villages of Wolverley and all the schools that are in the locality. Fourthly, the community benefits from £2 per tonne local community tax, known as the aggregates levy. This is fantastic. It was brought in 2002. It mitigates the impact on the local community, so the community can benefit from it. But I would say that the government has, I think, made a mistake in 2010 when it ended the aggregates levy sustainability fund, and that was as a result of the spending review. This was something which brought together industry, environmentalists and local communities to restore areas affected by extraction and transforming degraded sites back into areas which could be used by the local community. So those are basically the areas where I kind of broadly agree with the government's position. However, there are a lot of issues, areas of contention. The first is the location of this quarry. It is absolutely bang in between 2 villages. It fits in, as I say, in between Wolverley to the west, directly on its western extremes, and Cookley to the north. And to the south is Sion Hill, a suburb of Kidderminster. There are 4 schools within a mile's distance of the centre of this site. Wolverley C of E Secondary School is 0.9 of a mile away. Cookley's Seabright Primary is 5/8 of a mile away. St Oswald's Primary School in Kidderminster is just over half a mile away. Heathfield Knowles School's nursery is on the other side of the road from the edge of the second phase of this site. And just over a mile away is Wolverley Seabright Primary School. But as I say, that's from the centre of the site. 105 acres obviously has extensions, meaning that it's much closer to some of these schools. And within the immediate locality are 3 communities. Cookley has 2,034 people on the electoral roll with 1,114 homes. Wolverley has 1,820 people on the electoral roll. Sion Hill has 760. There are a lot of people living very, very close to this site. And despite the proposal being low impact, it's absolutely inevitable these people will suffer from noise pollution, dust pollution, and impact on highways. And of course, I completely understand that there's an enormous amount of legislation surrounding, for example, the pollution put up by silicates as they come off these sites, and there's a requirement to suppress them. And one would hope that NRS Aggregates will comply fully with this legislation. I would expect them to do so. But it's possible you get accidents. And whilst accidents are wholly to be avoided, and any punishment is the right thing to do, the problem is an accident in an area where there's nobody living around it, you can get away with. An accident in the middle of a highly populated area is a really bad place to have an accident, so thereby creating greater threat to the local community. And finally, we have a riding stables, which is privately owned, right in the middle of this site. The riding stable will be quarried all around over the 10-year period. Their lives will be appallingly badly affected. So the whole planning application has very, very profound impacts on the local community, and the local community is very, very heavily against this. Just looking forward to the future, though, As I say, this planning application is merely for a 10-year period in order to extract 3 million tonnes of aggregates from a 105-acre site. And I met recently with Mr. Louis Strong, who seemed to me a perfectly reasonable, perfectly nice chap. He's the son of the owner of the site, 36 years old, wants to be a farmer. The site has been in the family for 3 generations, and his father, Mr. Strong, is a successful entrepreneur doing land deals and now lives in Jersey. As I say, Mr. Strong is the son strikes me as being a very sincere individual who genuinely wants to go farming, and I think that his wishes are at odds with his father's. But it's interesting, his father previously submitted and secured planning permission for the site to be a golf course, and for one reason or another, although planning was approved, these plans were shelved. But the farm is around 250 acres, and whilst they farm 1 or 2 other sites locally, the farm seems only marginally viable. And Mr. Strong, Mr. Louis Strong, is completely understandably seeking alternative cash generation schemes from his farm. Farm diversification is a wholly understandable and desirable option. And Mr. Strong, as I say, wants to continue, once this site returns to agricultural use, to continue farming this in the future. But Mr. Paisley, I used to be an investment banker, and amongst other things, I used to invest and study aggregate companies and extraction companies. I'm absolutely convinced of Mr. Strong's sincerity and his desire to be a farmer. But the key principle in this application is NRS Aggregates Limited, who are entirely in the business, actually not entirely in the business, they do a number of different things, but in this particular case, are entirely in the business of extracting value from the ground. So I know that they'll be eager to secure the maximum output from this quarry. And in order to deliver their fiduciary duty to shareholders, they will, having secured the big heave of getting initial planning permission across the line, almost certainly seek to maximise the output beyond that which is stated in their initial low-impact intentions. And there are too many variables which could cause changes of decisions over the coming 10 years. Abstraction rates, as we know, are determined by market demand, and the cost to developers of sand and gravel are a function of market price and delivery costs. We're just proposing in the budget to increase the demand for aggregates by encouraging the building of 300,000 houses per year over the next few years. This can only result in an increase in the price of the aggregate and a subsequent increase in the digging out in the increase in quarrying. And so whilst the argument that local demand means there is a local market, this requires the demand locally to match in every way the continuous abstraction of 300 tonnes per annum. So how can anyone predict at this stage the exact flow of local demand? It requires synergy for a decade, which is very unlikely to happen. Should there be a period of low development locally, the quarry will have to either find markets further afield or slow down production. And this would bring into question the end date of the process. Similarly, if demand is high, will the quarry beef up production, seeking to vary its planning permission to excavate at a higher and thus more aggravating rate that will cause greater concern and upset to the local community? And if market rates continue to rise for sand and gravel, there will be a greater imperative to dig more. This is going to create more hassle to my community if the planning grant is then, if they then seek to change the planning grant in order to extract more aggregates from that area. In any event, the average 6-roomed home requires around 100 tonnes of sand and gravel. And in wild forests, that equates to a total demand of 5,400 tonnes of sand and gravel, and that compares with 3 million tonnes being excavated. The vast majority of the output of this quarry actually is going to have to go out of district. And looking at the green issues, the local plan has a variety of sites across the district. Meeting low emission targets for delivery could easily see a subsequent application to change the left-only exit policy from the site, meaning lorries driving past a number of schools and through villages. The environment's interests on this particular argument actually are at odds with the interests of the local community. And by the way, did I mention this is absolutely smack in the middle of the green belt? So it's quite an offensive in terms of the green belt legislation as well. There are plenty of examples of quarries that have subsequently submitted planning applications in order to enhance the size of the quarry. Clifton Quarry in Worcestershire was extended in 2016. Willingdon Quarry was seeking to enable the production of in 2017, enable the production of a further 2.07 million tonnes of sand and gravel. Chadwich Lane Quarry in Bromsgrove, there's a proposed extension to restore the quarry. Barton Quarry Western, extension to Barton Quarry to extract 6.3 million tonnes of sand and gravel over a period of 10 years. These are extensions, by the way, these aren't the absolute planning. Newington Quarry, proposal of an extension to sand and gravel extraction. Norton Bottoms Quarry, 4-phase extension. Hints Quarry, variation of conditions, Methalite Quarries. extension for further 10 years, and on it goes. Quarries do change their planning applications. They want to extend what's going on. So this quarry is already hideously offensive to the local community. What will it be if they decide to extend, if NRS aggregates decide they want to maximise the output from this opportunity? This application is due to go before Worcester County Council's Planning Committee later this year, possibly in May. Officers are committed to ensuring that planning law is upheld, and it may well be that they recommend approval. Of course, all of us know that the planning committee members are prevented from predetermination, so I have no idea how the planning committee will vote. But I think if they possibly take the recommendation of the officers, it's not impossible that this may get passed. But if this application fails, it will almost certainly be challenged. And in the event of a successful appeal and the inspector pass the application, I would want to warn the Minister that I will be asking him to call in this decision to get the Secretary of State to take a look at it. And indeed, there are plenty of examples where planning has been refused in the past. By way of example, Wongford Quarry in Suffolk, there was a proposed expansion of Wongford Quarry, and it was blocked given its location in an area of outstanding natural beauty. The planning inspector found that there were no exceptional circumstances to justify the expansion of mineral extraction on this site. The Thrislington Quarry in County Durham, residents were fighting Lafarge's aggregates proposed extension of the quarry. Officers had recommended that the planning committee didn't object to the development, but councillors blocked the quarry due to the unprecedented level of objection to the scheme, with 1,366 individual letters and objections. And it's entirely possible, by the way, that on this quarry application we may have a similar number of letters of objections. Bengio Quarry in Hereford, campaigners were fighting plans to quarry an extra 1.25 million tonnes of sand and gravel from this field. The planning inspector rejected plans for the quarry. However, the developer appealed to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State backed the views of residents, and the planning inspector cited that the quarry had the potential to threaten water supplies and loss of amenity. But more importantly, and very similar to what we're facing in Lee Castle Farm, his concerns were also raised due to health risks from silica dust in the air and the significant damage to an open space in the green belt. Similarly, Fulham Quarry in Oxfordshire, Oxfordshire-based company Hills Quarry Products wanted to use land over 12.5 years to extract 2.5 million tonnes of earth. It was finally rejected in 2017, reapplied in 2018. The council turned the application again over, concerns about the green belt and fears highways impact. This is for a smaller and less impactful development. So, Mr. Paisley, I'm not against quarrying, but I am against quarrying in people's backyards, in semi-urban areas. Canada has a 600-metre rule forbidding quarrying within 600 metres of schools and residences. If we were in Canada, and I know there is an argument that they've got more available space in Canada, but nonetheless, the point is still well made by them. If we were in Canada, there is no part of this quarry that is not covered by a 600-metre radius around every school or property adjacent to this site. So my ask of the Minister today is, first of all, to be aware of my intention that if this goes through, and if the planning inspectors do go through, that I will be seeking to call it in and would ask him to give all his support to help the Secretary of State come to a sensible decision. And obviously in this case, by the way, Mr. Paisley, sensible means backing my constituents, if there's any doubt about that. But also, I think, to ask the Minister to review planning rules on quarries. Again, I completely accept we need to have quarries, but we cannot have quarries that are so close to people's private residences, businesses and schools. It doesn't make any sense. If Canada can have a 600-metre rule, why can't we have something like that similarly here? So those are my two answers to the Minister. I very much look forward